Did you know? Naughty Dog worked on The Last of Us in secret for 2 full years. After completing Uncharted 2 in 2009, Naughty Dog split their staff into 2 teams, one to work on The Last of Us and one to work on Uncharted 3. However, the surprise reveal of The Last of Us was almost completely ruined. Naughty Dog originally planned for The Last of Us to be announced before Uncharted 3 released, but the announcement was pushed back. This led to the developers accidentally leaving an Easter egg on Uncharted 3 for The Last of Us. The Easter egg can be found in a newspaper article that states, "Scientists are still struggling to understand deadly fungus." This of course references the fungal-infected humans from The Last of Us and was meant to build hype for the game after its reveal. Fortunately, nobody realized Naughty Dog were teasing their new game, and The Last of Us' surprise reveal went as planned. This was partly because nobody knew Naughty Dog had split up into 2 teams. Gamers simply assumed the company had nothing else in development at the time. The bar you find the newspaper in is linked to another Easter egg. The same bar service area appears in The Last of Us at a bar called O'Sullivan's Irish Pub. The bar's name is also a reference to Uncharted's Victor Sullivan. The Last of Us has other connections to the Uncharted series. In Uncharted 2, there were collaborative gameplay segments with Nathan Drake and the Tibetan guide Tenzin. The interaction between these 2 characters became a useful way to tell the game's story. This gave Naughty Dog the idea to develop Joel and Ellie's characters through similar mechanics. Interestingly, when Naughty Dog first split into 2 teams, the second team hadn't decided on what game to make. They considered doing another game in the Jak and Daxter series. However, the developers felt they had to work on a new IP to justify making a second team. The infected in The Last of Us are based on a cordyceps fungi. Cordyceps fungi can grow from an insect's head while infecting their brain, taking control of the insect's motor functions. VentureBeat.com asked The Last of Us creative director Neil Druckmann about the game's premise. Dean Takahashi of VentureBeat compared elements of The Last of Us to an episode of the BBC sci-fi show Primeval. In the episode, fungus from the future infects people and converts them into humanoid fungi. Druckmann responded, stating, "No, the BBC show we were ripping off was Planet Earth, where they talked about the cordyceps fungus and how it affects insects." The game's director, Bruce Straley, added that the 2 men would watch the videos that literally used the term zombie ants. They used this as a jumping off point to make their concept art of fungi-infected humans. Straley went on to say, "There's something beautiful and intriguing about the pictures of the fungus and how colourful and delicate it was. We wanted that contrast between the elegance and the delicacy versus the pure anguish, pain and disgust of being controlled by a parasite." Other inspirations for the game included films such as True Grit, 28 Days Later, and the comic and TV series of The Walking Dead. Druckmann believed storytelling as a whole had become lazy in the games industry and endeavored to create a rich narrative in The Last of Us. As well as movies, literature, and other video games, Druckmann and Straley took inspiration from real-life events. One notable inspiration for the game was the Spanish influenza. The 1918 Spanish flu pandemic displayed the vulnerability of the human species. It also showed what paranoid lengths we'd go to in order to stop a pandemic spreading. During the spread of the flu in New York City, for example, citizens could be fined up to $500 or even imprisoned for coughing and sneezing in public. Across the United States, public settings like cinemas, libraries, and even schools and churches were closed down in attempts to stop the spread. Druckmann also considered the lengths he'd go to protect his family, drawing inspiration from his newly found fatherhood. "All of a sudden, I realized just how far I'd go to save my kid. Things I've never ever thought about before. It's become a huge inspiration." With humanity itself crumbling, the game wouldn't need a stereotypical bad guy to push the characters and test what questionable things they would do. That said, Druckmann played around with the idea of having a villain chase Joel and Ellie throughout the game. He ultimately decided against it, believing a stereotypical villain would make the game feel like it was trying to fit a Hollywood story structure. This antagonist would have been Tess. In an early plot scenario, Tess would follow Joel across the country after Joel betrayed her. Joel would eventually be caught, forcing Ellie to save him by killing Tess. Druckmann instead explored the idea that Joel and Ellie aren't necessarily good or bad, but are on the same level as the outlaws who attack them. At PAX Prime 2013, Naughty Dog showed off enemy characters that never made it into the game. The creatures shown were somewhat different to the infected seen in the final release. They appeared to be bold, fanged beasts with stringy fungus growing off of their back. Other early concepts looked like generic zombies with fungi-like growths scattered around their bodies. The developers felt these iterations didn't feel like still living infected humans, which is why they were scrapped. The team ultimately mashed together images of diseases and fungi, then mapped them onto a human model. This is how they arrived at the clicker enemy design, which served as their starting point for all other designs. Another enemy that was cut from the final game is an infected elephant. It had tendrils of fungus extending from its legs and blooming mushrooms on its head. A scenario in the game would have had this creature chasing Joel as he desperately scrambled away. The team decided early on that they wanted zoo animals to roam freely in parts of the game. This would develop into the game's famous giraffe scene. One other unused element in the game was Ellie's puppy. Early concept art shows Ellie carrying her dog after it was injured. The idea of Ellie and Joel adopting the pup was ultimately be cut entirely. It was also planned for Ellie to use her fungal immunity to cross spore-filled areas. This would have allowed players to control her much earlier in the game. Speaking of playing as Ellie, Naughty Dog outright lied to gamers and press during the game's marketing. They stated in interviews that you would never play as Ellie. This was done to leave some surprise in the game after it was released. During the game's development, Naughty Dog discovered its research firm was planning to run focus tests exclusively with male gamers. The team demanded that the focus groups also include women. Druckmann himself stated, "My big surprise during this process is that the research group wasn't planning on focus testing female gamers. It's something we had to specifically request. I hope this is a relic of the past that will soon go away." This wasn't the only time Naughty Dog had to push for equality. The company was also pressured to change the front of the box art for The Last of Us. A male-dominated image was desired which put Joel up front, but relegated Ellie to somewhere in the background. Naughty Dog flat out refused this proposal, choosing to go with a cover that portrayed Joel and Ellie together. Ellie's appearance was revised after the game's announcement trailer. This was due to her resembling the actress Ellen Page. Despite these changes, many players mistakenly assumed that Ellen Page played Ellie in the game. Page was asked about Ellie's likeness to her on Reddit, and she said, "I guess I should be flattered that they ripped off my likeness, but I'm actually acting in a video game called Beyond Two Souls, so it was not appreciated." That's all for today, but don't forget to subscribe to Did You Know Gaming and follow Did You Know Gaming on Facebook and Twitter. Make sure you also check out didyouknowgaming.com, and if you like this video, check out our other videos. And hey, if you want to see what I do on my channel, you can have a look at my top 10 personal favorite snow levels in all of video games. I got nothing. It's pretty much self-explanatory. You can have a look if you like to.